I wanted to show you an example of a polyphonic texture, but unfortunately there wasn't a Pop Goes the Weasel polyphonic example that I could find, so I'm going to show you this instead, which is a piece of music by J.S. Bach. And as I said, J.S. Bach is kind of the master of polyphonic textures, and particularly this thing called imitative counterpoint, which we might talk about in sometime in the future. But the main thing we're talking about here when we're looking at polyphonic texture is we're looking at a texture where there isn't a really clear melody part and there isn't a really clear harmony part or accompaniment part, and we definitely see that here. This is a piece of music for keyboard, so it might be for a piano or probably more likely a harpsichord or some other earlier version of a keyboard instrument. Again, if you don't really read music, that's totally fine. I'm not really expecting you to be able to read all of these notes, but instead just look at how the dots are arranged on the page. So this line up here and in the lines below is for the right hand, and the second of the two lines is for the left hand. And what we'll see is that the right hand part and the left hand part are both kind of quite independent and quite melodic. So there isn't a really obvious right hand part that's the melody and the left hand part that's the accompaniment or the chords like we had in the previous homophonic example. Instead, we've got something quite different here, where if we look at each part separately, they have some quite nice melodic elements to them, and that's what makes this music really special, in that the melody is being passed from left hand to right hand all the time, and that's quite an interesting effect. If we take this first line as an example, what we'll see is something quite interesting, that a melodic idea is being passed from the left hand to the right hand. This is what the first line sounds like in the right hand. So this set of running 16th notes is quite an important feature of the music. And it's a melodic kind of idea. It's definitely the tune of the music at that point. But what we'll see is that when we go into the left hand, that same idea, that same little melodic idea is appearing an octave lower in the left hand part. And that's where Bach is being really clever here, because he's not just taking one hand to be the melody part and the other hand to be the accompaniment part. Instead, he's kind of chucking the melody from hand to hand and creating a really interesting textured effect with his music. And I'm going to play the rest of the opening of this composition, and hopefully you'll keep hearing that little figure, sometimes appearing in the right hand and sometimes appearing in the left hand. I'm going to do my best to try and draw it in when it comes in the music, and this is what polyphonic texture is really great at, passing little melodic snippets around from hand to hand, and it can be a really exciting effect. There we go, so I'd recommend you go and have a listen to this piece. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Invention Number 1 by J.S. Bach, and there's loads more inventions by him that make use of this idea of polyphony, this idea of passing little melodic ideas from one part to the other, and there being no very obvious melody part and no very obvious harmony part. Instead, lots of strands of melody are kind of woven together to make a really interesting texture.